part 2 of Moving West. We're going to talk about the war with Mexico. So President Polk's going to urge a war, and he's going to push for war with Mexico. Tensions between the U.S. and Mexico increase. One important side note here is most of the generals in the Civil War and most of the higher officers in the Civil War actually fight in the Mexican-American War and get a lot of experience, a lot of valuable experience during this war in the 1840s. So as you see, Polk in his dream of manifest destiny, he believed that the war would bring New Mexico, the whole California territory, into the Union. The border disputes with Texas and Mexico, of course, Polk's going to support Texas, and he's going to send John Slidell down to Mexico to negotiate. So as you see here, we want to purchase California. Now, California is not like you think it is today. It's this whole area of Nevada, all the way over to Colorado. It's a huge tract of land. So we want to purchase California and New Mexico from Mexico. And as you see, we also want to gain approval of the Rio Grande as the border for Texas. So the president of Mexico at this time was Herrera, and he refuses to see John Slidell. So this is called Slidell's rejection because the president of Mexico refused to see him. So the second thing that happens here is General Zachary Taylor's blockade. Basically in response to this, Polk sent a General Taylor to the Rio Grande to block off the Rio Grande. In the Mexican view, this is a violation of territorial rights. In the American view, this is disputed land and public land. So the public's going to be behind Polk on this. And keep in mind, this whole area is in dispute. So, you know, the Mexicans feel like this is a violation. So if you look, you know, the California territory, this is the California territory, and of course New Mexico's in here, but this is the California territory. So this is Polk's war message to Congress. If you read it here, you'll see, you know, he's pretty intent on going to war with Mexico. Here is the U.S. Army in Texas in 1845. So sectional attitudes toward this war. The gag rule that we had talked about in the last unit that was placed on Congress not to talk about slavery in 1836, it's lifted in 1845, and immediately we get to talking about slavery. So, and the issue of slavery. So the South, most people want to go to war and extend slavery because when we win the territories out west, we could extend slavery into the territory. That's how Southerners saw this. Geographically speaking, guys, you need to kind of keep in mind that most of this area is desert and mountains. So geographically, it's not going to really lend itself to slavery because there's not going to be these huge farms that the Southerners thought there would be. But anyway. The North, of course, opposed the war. They saw it as a plot of Southerners to ensure slave state power. In 1846, the war begins. General Taylor sends his troops across the Rio Grande. 11 troops were killed. Polk immediately asked Congress for war, a declaration of war, that statement on the previous slide you read. A young freshman senator, first years in public office, Abraham Lincoln, he questions the validity of Polk's claim, and he introduced the spot resolution asking President Polk to clarify the location of the skirmish and whether or not our troops were armed. It's ignored, and Congress declares war. So, the Long March and the Bear Flag. Colonel William Kearney marches his troops west, and if you look here, he's called the Long Marcher because his men marched over 800 miles from New Mexico, and New Mexico is going to fall without a shot. And if you look at the map, he marches all the way to California, and he marches them all the way back to Nebraska. So this is why he's called the Long Marcher. The Bear Flag Republic. Polk offered to buy California, I believe, for $10 million, something like that. in 1845, California had about 7,000 Mexican residents and only 700 U.S. settlers. So John Fremont in 1846 took over the town of Sonoma, and he declared it independent from Mexico and raised a flag with a bear on it. If you look, to this day, this is California's state flag. So Polk called on volunteers to fight. 73,000 showed up. They were not soldiers, of course. They were farmers and just ordinary men. 1 out of every 10 American soldiers died in less than 2 years of service. And how this happened was disease. Disease is going to kill most of them, about 7/8 of them. Crowded, unsanitary conditions and impure water led to dysentery, lice, and other diseases that spread rapidly and killed our soldiers. We end up losing 12,518 soldiers during the war. So some technological things here you might want to know, and economic things. We have 17 million people in the U.S. As you see, Mexico has 7 million. Our economy is growing. Mexico's deeply in debt. We have artillery, superior large guns, and better ammunition. We have better rifles, handguns, including the Colt revolver, and we have the telegraph for better communication. So let's make a deal. This is what President Polk had in mind. Now, you read through this and think of this. Could a president get away with this stuff today? Just think about that. So General Santa Anna, or leader, he's president at one time of Santa Anna, or he's the president one time of Mexico. And Santa Anna had been living down in Cuba since 1845 in exile because he had been run out of power. So Polk wants to make a deal with him. Basically, what Polk wants to do is help him get back power in Mexico and regain his presidency. And in return, Santa Anna would end the war immediately in Mexico and mediate favorable borders for the U.S. So that's the deal. The deal is the U.S. is going to put him back into power, and he's going to end the war, and he's going to give us what we want. Well, here's what happens. Instead of this, Santa Anna took control of the army in February of 1847. He attacks Taylor's forces at Buena Vista, and he continues the war, and he double crosses us. He double crosses the president. So think about this. Could a president do this today and get away with it? Could a president do this today and not look weak and have a bunch of problems? So Polk did, though. So there you go. There's some of the battles here you can see in Mexico. Give you some of the battles here. So this is a map that just kind of show you what's going on with the battles and the marching lines. You see here's Kearney. Oh, here's Kearney's Long March. So quickly, the war in Mexico led by General Zachary Taylor. He's known as Old Rough and Ready because basically he always wore his everyday clothes, his everyday work uniform, and he's always ready for a fight, so his soldiers called him Old Rough and Ready. And you had Winfield Scott. They called him Old Fuss and Feathers simply because every time he went into battle, he had to dress up in his formal military outfit, and they had the ruffles on the chest of the uniforms back then, so they called him Old Fuss and Feathers. So Taylor at Monterey in September of 1846, he attacked and captured Monterey. Scott in Veracruz is one of the first amphibious assaults in world history. 10,000 men were ferried onto land by 67 boats in under 5 hours. It's a military feat of its time. How big of a feat was this? It's only surpassed with D-Day. So this was a big deal. The goal basically was to capture Mexico City, and on September 14th, 1847, they marched 260 miles without losing a battle, and they will eventually capture Mexico City. So, America claims the spoils of war. You have the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and if you look here, Mexico and the U.S. signed this treaty. Mexico agrees that the Rio Grande is the border. The U.S. paid Mexico $15 million, $3 million for the debts. Mexico gave us California, which includes modern-day California, Nevada, New Mexico, Wyoming, Utah, Arizona, and Colorado. It's over 500 square miles of land. This treaty guarantees bilingual elections for now Mexican Americans. It also guarantees property protection for Mexican Americans. It also guarantees freedom of religion for now Mexican Americans. And it promises open and free borders between Mexico and the U.S. and the southwest part of the U.S. Think about that. So that's what this treaty promises. Relations between the U.S. and Mexico, of course, are not good. They're bad. This will lead to sectionalism in the U.S., slavery, sectionalism in the U.S. Slavery led to the Civil War, guys. What this is saying is basically this intensified sectionalism in the U.S. and will we have slavery out west? The Gadsden Purchase, 1853. Of course, Franklin Pierce authorizes this. James Gadsden goes down to Mexico, offers $10 million for the land south of the Gila River in present-day New Mexico and Arizona, and we did this to build a transcontinental railroad for the South. Stephen Douglas wanted this as well. He is the leader behind this, and it establishes our present-day border with Mexico in regards to New Mexico and Arizona. So if you think about it, Mexico was offered $10-15 million for California. They went through a war. We ended up taking the land from them, and we paid them $15 million. So in 1853, Mexico didn't want no part of it, and they just took the money. So in 1848, Zachary Taylor, Old Rough and Ready. You can kind of see from this picture here why he's known as Old Rough and Ready. And by the way, this is in his good suit. Taylor is elected in 1848. Polk's in bad health and he won't run for re-election. And actually he dies, I think, in June of 49. So Democrats, Lewis Cass runs for president, anti-slavery, and as you see, he's colorless and he's a popular sovereignty guy. You have Martin Van Buren now running in the Free Soil Party, former president. The Whigs nominate this gentleman Cotton, and basically, you have the Whigs that split, and they nominate Zachary Taylor. And the big thing is, you need to know Zachary Taylor barely wins this very close election. Keep in mind, Zachary Taylor is a war hero, so we continue our line of war heroes for presidents. As you see, the California Gold Rush in 1848, James Marshall discovers gold in Sutter's Mill in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Word gets out fast. You get the 49ers. These are people moving from the east. These are people moving from all over the world into California. Soon people heard about this, and they flock. About 1,000 people a day were showing up into this small little town called San Francisco. People from all over the world. California would, in 1 year, go from about 7,000 people to over 100,000 people. They called for a state convention, and they wrote a constitution that outlawed slavery, and they applied for statehood, which is going to cause a whole new battle. If you look here, guys, this is San Francisco in 1848. And as you can see, it cannot hold 1,000 people a new day. Think 1,000 people a day. Think about housing. Think about places to eat, jobs. They didn't have any of it. This is a slide on our land acquisitions up to 1868. Just because we're not going to talk about Manifest Destiny in the future doesn't mean we are not involved with it. In 1867, we purchased Alaska from the Russians for $7 million. This is called Seward's Folly because Secretary of State William Seward buys this and he's blamed for it the rest of his life. Turns out Alaska is a gold mine, oil, diamonds, things of that nature. Native American problems. If you look here, I like to point out that basically, the natives and these Americans were, not having a good time. The Fort Laramie Treaty is important. Read through this. We promised Native Americans open and free land forever, and we backed out on it.